Good afternoon, and welcome to Understanding and Mitigating Security Risks Around AI Projects, a health system CIO production sponsored by Quisitive. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Health Systems CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take those later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring JD Whitlock, CIO at Dayton Children's Hospital, Paul Carrillo, CISO at Inova Health System, Jimmy Ledbetter, VP for AI Strategy and Services with Quisitive, and Ed Higgins, Executive Director for Security and Compliance Solutions and Security Office Leader with Quisitive. All right. Great conversation on tab today. Lots of issues we're going to bring out. So let's jump right in. JD, you want to start off, give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Sure, Anthony. I am blessed to be CIO at Dayton Children's. I've been here for 6 years. Dayton Children's is a small health system. As the name implies, it's a pediatric health system. We're on the small end of Epic customers, which plays into this conversation some. About 4,000 FTEs, about 700 million revenue. And so we are a teaching hospital, but not an academic medical center with lots of research dollars to throw around, which also factors into this conversation. So there's a high level right there.
Perfect. Thanks, JD. Paul?
Well, good morning. Inova is Northern Virginia's leading nonprofit health provider. Our mission is to provide world-class healthcare every time, every touch to each person in every community we have the privilege to serve. We have about 20,000 team members, and we service about 2 million patients a year. Our 5 hospitals are consistently recognized by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Leapfrog Hospital Safety Grades for Excellence in Healthcare, and other awards as well. We have about 1,900 beds, licensed beds across our 5 hospitals. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Inova Health System. I've been in healthcare now for about 25 years, and I'm wrapping up a 40-year military service in the information dominance domain. We focus on building highly resistant, highly talented teams to tackle tough problems. I partner with many organizations and agencies to advance cyber hygiene and disrupt criminal intent on harming U.S. healthcare. And I also serve as the chairman for the VHHA Cybersecurity Committee, advancing cyber objectives within the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you. Jimmy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy Ledbetter. I'm the VP of AI Strategy and Services here at Quisitive. So a little bit about Quisitive. So Quisitive is a Microsoft partner. So we are actually the top 0.01% of all Microsoft partners because we service the entire Microsoft cloud. So anywhere from data and AI to app dev, to, infra, modern work, and to security. So we cover everything that our customers need from the start all the way to the finish. So we actually have we've won a partner of the year several times in the healthcare space. So we actually have a really deep domain in that, especially with our MesaCare product around MesaCare Copilot, how we can actually use AI to help people out with like scheduling and things like that inside of the healthcare domain. Personally, been in the field of advanced analytics for 22 years. I spent the bulk of my career standing up data warehouses and data science divisions nationwide. Probably have several hundred under my belt. When it comes to AI, I've got a background. My master's is in data science. I'm currently finishing up a PhD in the same thing. But I've been familiar with the model since about 2018 when I say they did some things that were like stupid human tricks, really cool formatting things, but didn't really pay any attention to it. Got together on the board of directors at the University of Missouri, late 2022. We saw the new 3.5 models and we said, this is going to change everything. And I haven't talked about anything since. So been working with about 150, I had over 1,000 conversations in 2023 about how do we do generative AI at scale, and actually have implemented several solutions at 150 plus customers, including the largest implementation of what they call semantic kernel, which is how you make the AI do something at 85,000 concurrent users. So, but happy to be part of the panel today.
All right, great, Jimmy. Very good. Ed?
It's great to meet everyone. My name is Ed Higgins. I head up our security and compliance team here at Quisitive. I've been with Quisitive for the last 7 years, came here to create our managed security services business. out of like Jimmy had mentioned, a Microsoft partnership that goes back 30 years. So we've been a close ally to that technology, and we've seen the good, the bad, the improved, and so our team helps customers implement that security stack and optimize their cloud and their Azure and their journey in that space. So I'm part of that team. I speak to CISOs and CIOs every day of the week. My job is to work with our sellers and our front end and our leadership, and meet with our customers and new prospective customers to understand their challenges and to see how our company can align with them. Career-wise, I'm a 38-year security veteran. I started in the DoD space a long time ago, was a designer of systems, an electrical engineer by trade, and designed some trusted compute systems and encryption models back in the early days. I ran a few data centers. I've been a technology consultant, client-facing for most of my career. I was a CIO for 5 years, and then a chief information security officer for about 10 of those years. Two businesses, 5 years a piece. One was a very large healthcare and claims processing business. So I come from both the business angle as well as the technology angle. So that's what I get to do every day. I love what I get to do every day by meeting customers and understanding them. So I'm hoping that my involvement today is helpful and beneficial, and it's great to meet everyone. So thank you.
All right, Ed, thank you very much. Okay, first question, JD, we're going to start with you. In what workflows or use cases has your organization begun or plans to begin AI-infused projects?
Sure. So Anthony, the first thing we have to do is define what we mean by AI, because we have to distinguish between predictive and generative. Of course, the predictive is nothing new. We've been doing that for a long time. So if we're talking that, then we're talking about all sorts of things. But typically, when we're having these conversations now, we're talking about generative AI. I think that's mostly what we want to focus on today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the generative AI, we, like most health systems, are about to start piloting ambient AI digital scribes, sometimes ambient AI clinical documentation tools like Microsoft Nuance DAX, Bridge, a couple other vendors. I mentioned those two because they have the best integrations with Epic. Most health systems are at least planning on doing that. Sort of a no-brainer use case to help doctors and other providers be more efficient in the documenting the care that they're delivering. We are also going to be piloting Microsoft 365 Copilot, like most others are doing. And then we are going to be using tools that Epic is bringing to us that are ultimately powered through their partnership with Microsoft and some of the ChatGPT tool sets. But those are individual projects that will, like any other project we do, what is the benefit and the ROI for that? And what we are not doing is, building our own LLMs or I saw an article recently. It said CIOs need to factor in more power for their data centers to run all the LLMs. So we're not doing that.
Yeah, that's JD. That would be the biggest of the big. That would be doing that, like the super huge mega health systems.
Maybe I haven't heard of anybody doing their own, but so back to my comment about we're not an academic medical center. These academic medical centers that have these massive research budgets, they have a whole business model around pressing the envelope on innovative things, and there are some grants that are coming out. There's this ARPA-H, this relatively new agency modeled after the DARPA. We won't go into, if you haven't heard of that, we won't go into all that. It's sort of a healthcare approach to the DARPA model of using federal money for really innovative things. So they just came out with a grant that is going to look into how do we make sure that using generative AI chatbots for actual medical uses, how do we measure the hallucination and make sure that that's valid? sort of a science project around validating that. So those are the kind of things that typically academic medical centers are going to go after, where a Dayton Children's might not.
All right, very good. Paul, what are your thoughts about what are you guys doing over at Innova?
So yes, very similar. We've been using predictive, I guess, predictive AI in many of the platforms that we use already, particularly in the cyberspace. We are using Copilot across the enterprise. We're expanding that now. That will be done this year. We've also used the artificial intelligence, generative AI capability in physician communications, where a physician is able to receive information, modify that information to suit their needs, suit their style, and then use that communication in communicating with our patients. We are looking at other opportunities like patient scheduling or ambient AI, those kind of use cases as well. But again, just as JD said, we're looking at return on investment, and whether or not that actually makes sense for our community, for our patients. And along the same lines, we are more focused on easing the friction points for physicians and clinicians rather than replacing any person in the clinical setting.
All right, very good. Jimmy, what are you hearing from clients? Like, what do you see people working on?
Sure. We've actually got some really interesting things going on around one use case I wanted to talk about was around document generation. The way that generative AI has showed up, and it's allowed us to have access to unstructured data in a way that we've never seen before. So what we've seen is a lot of our clinicians, when they're taking notes, they're actually having to go to 3, 4, 5 different systems and try to build that document. It's like, okay, I've got my diagnosis out here, I've got my patient record out of here. How do I put all of this together? The ability to start building pipelines and use natural language to say, get this field out of here and put it into this document, get this field out of here and bring it into this document. That's something that we're seeing that's saving an immense amount of back office time, because somebody's having to stop what they're doing, put together that document. Now that we've got these pipelines that are using that natural language, it's really helping out. Transcription is something that we're seeing a lot of right now, is the ability to use the large language model to transcribe in their proto language. It doesn't have to be in English. It can be whatever their native language is, and transcribe that into multiple languages at the same time, especially with the new 4 Omni models. We're seeing a lot of adoption at that rate. We're also seeing a lot around the idea of like using it to find, like scheduling issues, like how can we actually build the chatbot into our scheduling platform and start looking for, hey, I need 30 minutes for something, where our traditional chatbots followed a web, it's like, okay, if they answer this question, then go down this path. Now it's actually able to read and find, hey, for this type of meeting, I really need 45 minutes. And how do I do that? And then what's a little more cutting edge, and we're getting ready to start looking into this. And JD brought it up, and I thought it was a really interesting idea. Is a lot of people are talking about, like, I got to train my own LLM. That's huge. There's, we're talking tens of millions of dollars to build those up. But the small language models are actually showing up. Microsoft actually developed some called Phi models, which can actually be run on devices. It doesn't need that huge, massive supercomputer behind the scenes. And we can train that specifically on your data and your data alone. It can be run inside of a container, and it doesn't go anywhere. And so now, where people, 12 months ago were thinking, I'm going to have to start training out these huge LLMs, the technology is getting small enough to where we can say, hey, let's actually start training some SLMs out there, which we now control, where it doesn't go outside of our container. It just stays completely inside of that area. So that's a couple areas that our customers have really started to see some gains as far as using generative AI.
No, very interesting. I think we'll certainly get into that a bit more. Ed, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing out there?
It kind of echoes what Jimmy is saying. Certainly, we're in the same business company, so we tend to see the same clients and concerns. But I will say, like, for example, we're Quisitive. We're leveraging Gen AI to help us with a few things. In my security team, when we work with a new customer who's regulated or maybe not regulated, just has good best practice in place, there's a vendor due diligence or a vendor security risk management. So we see these surveys. Are you going to handle our data securely when you help us and provide services to our company. Well, those can inundate you with lots of different questions, lots of different ways of framing the exact same question thousands and thousands of times, and there's no one-stop shop for putting all your answers in one place and letting others look at your standard. So we have ISO 27000 certification, but these part of just the normal onboarding of relations with customers, we leverage Gen AI to help us populate answers that a human can kind of authorize. It's not just AI ships it to the customer. It leverages our knowledge base of things we've answered and knows the nuances between those ways that we've answered those same questions to be able to populate the responses, and cuts down what could be weeks into hours. So from interacting with customer onboarding process, that's helped us immensely with efficiency and being able to turn those around for our customers, and accurately too, mind you. The other area is, as I mentioned in my intro, I meet with hundreds of customers every month, maybe more than that each month. And so I take a lot of notes. I transcribe kind of everything that we're talking about so I can remember. And transcribing a meeting with Gen AI and being able to summarize the notes, those are baby steps into that space. But again, probably saves me a couple or 3 hours of the day cumulatively just in collecting my notes from a meeting and having it, kind of organized for me. So a little bit of a helper, kind of like, as Jimmy and I like to say, an intern on my staff, just able to capture and scribe those notes and give me those things back. Now, from our clients' perspective, and my security team serving our clients, we leverage Microsoft's Copilot for Security, which is a kind of a security use case of Gen AI. And it focuses on helping us process incident cases, or more like alerts and events. So, our systems kind of correlate those events, and being able to see them and then talk in human language, if you will, to the model, instead of having to write queries and code and take the time to figure out how to do all that. We're able to be much more agile in processing kind of alerts and cases, more particularly with our 24/7, our MDR side. So we leverage those things in our business, and our customers that have security operations centers are, hey, show us that trick. Can you help us? Can you help us adopt, Security Copilot for our efficiency at the SOC level? So, there's a few other kind of addendums to what Jimmy had shared, but we see that. We definitely see the, let's say, cautiously optimistic. We'll get into that with some of our other dialogue, I'm certain, but relative to kind of looking at how to containerize and kind of keep your sensitive data out of the container, playground that you're exploring Gen AI or Copilot or what have you, or those use cases. Those are where we spend a lot of time educating our clients on how they can do that, and not be kind of seen as an obstruction, but more as an enabler to those capabilities.
All right, very good. Excellent. Paul, we're going to start with you here. Do you have any specific security concerns around AI projects that you would not have with other sort of non-AI projects? If so, what are they?
Well, yes, and Ed really kind of touched on it already. Once sensitive data goes into the model, it's in the model. How do you get it out? How are you certain that you've got it out of there? So I think that's probably the biggest concern I have. Once you have data spillage, cleaning up after data spillage becomes really hard to do, maybe. We really haven't experienced how to do the cleanup yet. So that's the questionable part, right? In terms of being able to trace the integrity of information, that gets a little bit harder to do. A lot of the onus is on the input piece, right? Making sure that the data going in is actually the data you want to go in. So where perhaps a solution or an organization may have been a little sloppy in getting information into a model, that's probably going to result in some problems down the road, unexpected problems at that. So those are like the things that I think about when I think about this technology. I do think it's actually a wonderful opportunity to leverage the capabilities to create innovative solutions to the problems that we're facing. But when it comes to the security piece, I think more attention up front is going to be necessary in order to do it well and achieve the value that we expect to achieve.
Okay, very good. JD?
Paul answered that question so well. I have nothing to add.
All right, very good. Ed?
I hear this a lot. It echoes the gentleman prior to me here, just on their, their day-to-day business, the concerns around that. I will say that, when we all raced to the cloud, we moved things from on-prem to save money there and moved into a cloud where, that shared model, the vendor, whether it's AWS or Microsoft, they're taking care of the physical security, the patching of the servers, et cetera. And then where we have our responsibilities as consumers of that service to, safeguard our user identities and our data. So we moved very quickly into those spaces to get there. And there's what I call, and I'm an old guy, so I tend to kind of go back to these things about tech debt, where when we race there, we have this bit of tech debt that is yet unpaid. And it might be that we've relaxed our guard relative to, say, Tony, you and I being in the same company, and Jimmy, and sharing data because we're part of the same department or we're part of the same company. So we trust each other. We trust our employees. And, I think that kind of breaks down compliance in a sense for, need to know and those best practices. But, tech debt is the kind of things that kind of come back to haunt us. And if we have that oversharing potential, generative AI is going to blow past all of that obscurity. And because of that, I think, AI represents a new kind of a look that we need to give the data protection. Now, it can very well be done. It's an education process. Most of our clients, in the hundreds, don't realize that if I put basic tagging on these sensitive data to know the difference between good and bad, sensitive and unsensitive public data, or that which I want to be part of my model, then the AI will play by those rules. But it's a very steep education. We're kind of spending a lot of time helping our customers see the knack and the techniques that we use to help safeguard that data, and in some cases do these handful of things up front so you can start exploring Gen AI or AI. And then here's your longer term roadmap to pay off that tech debt in full, because you kind of need to do that for lots of other reasons other than Gen AI or AI projects. But I think the security concerns that I see day to day from our clients, and and even our own responsible use of Quisitive, we have a policy around appropriate and responsible use of AI in and of itself, in both our business and our customers' business. It all revolves around I need my identities to be tidy, so that the people that use these tools are the ones that kind of need to use the tools, and that we're not oversharing the data. Those two areas they seem to be kind of the biggest areas of concern. There are others, but those are by and large the biggest ones.
Paul, regarding what Ed was just saying, do you have any concerns there about that loss of obscurity, things like that?
I do. I think about this quite a bit. So this really kind of centers around whether an organization has an opt-in or opt-out model in terms of what unstructured data will be considered for consumption. If it's an opt-out model, that is, data is just consumed if it's there, that could lead to problems downstream. If it's an opt-in where somebody actually has to tag a thing or say this thing can be part of the model, that's a little bit more restrictive, but still that could lead to potential for, again, data spillage. If I accidentally mark something and it's included, but I want to pull it back out, can I? What's the mechanism for that? Today, I'm not sure we really fully know what that is yet.
All right, very good. Jimmy, anything you want to add?
Yeah, actually, a couple things. So I think everybody covered it really well, but there's some things that are worth double clicking on. So the first thing is really like companies not giving people access to a sandbox to experiment on, and that's creating shadow AI. We've had shadow data for years, and shadow AI is no different. So what's happening is by not giving somebody an area to at least experiment inside, then what's going to happen is they're going to go to the LLM's website themselves, where they could actually, to Paul and JD and Ed's point, they could be training the model on their data. So, and the good thing is there, at Quisitive, what we help people identify is like there's certain areas, like, if you're in Azure, there's no physical write back to the model. I could say train the model on this data, and there's no way it could do that. But we aren't standing those sandboxes up to make sure that we're keeping that in a very clean, contained environment. So the other thing from a security perspective that I'm noticing is, and I think it was covered well earlier, but people are trying to throw all of the data at the model. And so then what they're doing is they're having an application which is basically a Pandora's box. It's got everything that you want in it, where really what people start need to think about AI is on an application by application basis. So how do we, we've introduced something called a vector store, which is an AI database. How do we subset that data out and just load the relevant data, the relevant use case into that index, and then point the application to that? That way it doesn't have access to, hey, how much is Ed making a year? Or, how much PTO does Paul have, or anything like that. If you're keeping it down into a smaller area, we can go back and use traditional security features that we've had for decades. We can lock down the vector store just like we would lock down our databases. We can lock down the applications just like we've done in the past. What by people just trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, that's when people are being able to start kind of maneuvering around. People are trying to use like the large language model itself. They're trying to put in like system prompts to say, well, don't let the person look for this, when there are people who are gotten very good at what they call jailbreaking models, where it's like, I can get around and I can start finding what I want to look at. Where really, if we just go back to the basics, storing the relevant data out, securing the application, that's what really keeps our security at play. But people are still thinking that AI is a special use case. And all four of us were talking about this a little bit ago. It still follows a lot of the same procedures we've been doing for decades. It's just now we have the words AI in front of it.
All right, very good. Next question. Paul, we're going to start with you. How can healthcare IT executives best work with vendors and consultants around AI projects? When do health systems need to supplement a lack of in-house talent? And what are the best ways to structure the arrangements? I mean, there's a reason probably Jimmy and Ed have said they're having 1,000 conversations a month. People want more information. They don't want to get in over their head, right? They don't want to jump in the pool and then start to drown. Or you talked about pulling things back out, right? So you can get yourself into a dangerous situation if you don't do this wisely and thoughtfully. Sometimes people want to bring in experts for help. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, certainly bring in the experts, because you don't want to make a mistake in this space. For us as IT executives, outreach is important. Educating on the concerns and the available controls, whether they're administrative or technical, understanding where our control points are, and how we can leverage those to ensure that we're getting the value out of our investment in AI technology without increasing to an intolerable level, at least increasing our risk to the organization. I believe health systems need to recognize that unless they have subject matter experts already on staff that know this technology, have been working with this technology, that we really need a technology partner to help guide us on the journey. For those of us, and I don't think we are one, but for those health systems that have the benefit of a subject matter expert in artificial intelligence on staff, that's great. They're going to be a key person in reviewing use cases going forward. But for the rest of us, certainly having a trusted partner to help us along the AI journey, and not just simply looking for the innovation and creativity in how we can solve problems, but also going that one step further and being that devil's advocate to understand abuse and subterfuge and how that could harm the organization or harm our patients. I think that part is particularly important.
All right, very good. JD.
It's funny in the same way that we supposedly have this great shortage of cybersecurity professionals, and yet there's an unlimited supply of vendors reaching out on LinkedIn that want to help with cybersecurity. And now that's just added. Now that's AI, right? I get probably 5 a day. Hey, let's help you implement your AI. So plenty of help out there. Problem is I don't really need it because the things that we're talking about doing, once again, they're within our our existing platform. My 3 platform vendors, Epic EHR, Workday ERP, and Microsoft, 90-something% of anything we're going to be doing are just coming from those vendors, even if they're not coming through those vendors, like in the case of the ambient use case we talked about, that is coming through the door of Epic and integrated with Epic well. I still need to make sure that I trust that vendor to deal with our PHI and do the same cyber review we always do for that. But I have not yet experienced the need to like staff up with anybody in my team that needs to understand the AI, because the vendor's bringing that expertise and we're just making an ROI decision on whether we're going to implement this or not. So what I definitely do see, because we're a Microsoft shop, is getting smart on the use of all these Copilot tools. We touched on some of the other ones. Ed mentioned the security Copilot. We're going to be looking at that one too. Copilot Studio, how to use those tools well, staffing up for that. But I mean, it's Microsoft. There's going to be a million how-to. Microsoft's business model is to train everybody how to use all the tools so they make more money in Azure tokens, right? So there's no shortage of training there. So I have actually not experienced that yet. I'm sure that could happen in the future, that I have to get help.
So JD, let's talk a little bit more about this, because it's an interesting concept, and I think you're probably in the same boat as most CIOs out there, that when they're asked about how they're doing AI, they're doing AI in the sense that their main vendors are putting AI into their products. So when does it bleed outside of that? Does it ever, or is that only, again, for the big of the big that are going to be doing AI outside of what their vendors are doing in some, in a different way?
Sure. I guess what I'm saying is the ROI bar needs to be higher for doing that side. And then also, like in the case of ambient, like in the case of many other things, another example would be some of the autonomous coding vendors. That's a really good use case for generative AI. But once again, we're going to be picking the vendors that have the slickest integration with Epic, right? In the same way that our doctors and nurses work inside their clinical workflow in Epic, and if you want to do something cool new thing with AI, it needs to be integrated with a workflow. The same is true for our billers and coders, right? Those are still Epic workflows for the most part. There's some exceptions. And so if we're going to have an autonomous coding vendor, it needs to work really slickly with those Epic workflows. So it might be a new third-party vendor.
Right.
And you've convinced me that you've built a cool new tool powered by generative AI. Awesome. I'm still going to have our cyber team and make you. We use the Sentinel platform, but something to make sure you're doing all the right cyber things before we're going to let you touch our PHI, right? But that's not really different because you just happen to have a Gen AI tool versus some other tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, but that Epic integration is almost stakes to play. Don't bring me someone that Epic's never heard of. We're not going there. If you're going to bring me someone that you're interested, they have this amazing tool. Somehow they got to you, or they found you at a conference and they sold you and you love it. Don't bring them to me unless they already have an established relationship with Epic and are going to be tightly integrated. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, because in healthcare you have the vast majority of our employees are buried deep in an Epic workflow or in an ERP workflow, and so for the minority of our employees that are more like a traditional knowledge worker that's creating content, then we have the Microsoft tools for that. So if you're going to bring something external to that, I'm open to ideas, but it's got to be some amazing ROI that I'm going to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Paul, is it a similar dynamic where you are in terms of trying to stay in-house and in suite and all that kind of thing?
I would say in suite, yes. In house, probably not as much. I mean, yes, we're looking at just as JD just laid out. We're looking at AI very similarly. If we're going to do something that requires information out of Epic, out of our EHR, we're going to expect that there is a relationship there first. It might be a new relationship, but before we get too far down the road, we are going to want to understand the levels of protection that particular platform, that particular solution brings to ensure that our data is protected in the environment, and then that the expected information, the expected outcomes are in line with what our what we're expecting. Essentially, what our consumers are expecting.
Ed, oh, go ahead. Sorry,
No,
Paul.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Ed, what do you think about what you're hearing from JD and Paul?
No, I certainly appreciate that. I think there's two parts of it. There's technologies that can help. I think JD couched it extremely well, where if it adds value to my Epic and my my HR environment and so forth, and Microsoft, etc., and it brings a value that has an appealing ROI, then let's look at that. Sometimes businesses like ours, we're as much consultants as we are tech deployers or recommenders. And so, like my team, for example, we've looked at thousands of environments from a security lens to identify where the maybe weaknesses are. And so, some would look at that as an assessment, but it's really about consulting. And sometimes when we're experts, customers are experts, they've got great teams, and they're so close to some of the work they're doing, they might miss some of the forest for the trees. So if there's a competent vendor out there that can align with a customer to help add value to what they're seeing, maybe it's being able to look at that same environment and say, hey, there's a couple of opportunities to improve that. Those sort of things develop rapport. We see that a lot. And a client may say, look, you guys showed us some things that we didn't see before. Here's what we're trying to explore on our own. And what's your view? We kind of earn those steps with our clients pretty regularly. So I think the part that I didn't hear as much of is maybe the estate consulting, kind of the where's my opportunities. We talked here about that data getting into Gen AI models. Well, what about the opt-in of GDPR and a global footprint? You have to ask your residents of those respected countries if you're okay with me putting your data into my system. You have to kind of disclose that, and it's an opt-in model, isn't opt-out. California may be opt-out for the CCPA, but on GDPR you have to opt in to that model to use that data in a system like a Gen AI. And now the question is, when a subject, this is all privacy related stuff, when a subject says, I have the right to be forgotten and I want you to remove me by law, it's a law, regardless of, it's a US business. If it's a European Union resident, you kind of have to determine, do I have a reason to keep that data, or should I just remove that data? And then if so, how do I redact it out of my Gen AI learning model? So if it's already in there, how do you remove it? Well, there's a lot of tools that our team works with and uses that are Microsoft tools, but the how to use them to manage individual privacy rights management. We help clients see the value of those tools and how to implement them, and implement them for the clients in some cases to handle that. To say, hey, user requested to be forgotten from my database or my environment. And these tools have the ability to go and redact that data and guarantee that it's not just lost in a backup somewhere. So I think the consulting side, and when we're a business that has bumped into, let's say I'll make myself vulnerable. we've done lots of projects, so we've had the opportunity to fail on things so that our clients don't have to. Let that sink in for a sec. If we've done 1,000 of the same type deployments, we're going to learn some things about the best way to deploy it, and then with that variety of environments that we serve, we can make recommendations to our client to help them not have to reinvent wheels. There's a value there, and I think the gents see that, but we weren't really talking about that side of it as much as we were the technical side of it.
Very good, Jimmy. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, one of the things that when you're looking at the consultants, the one thing I especially in our neck of the woods, is I try to make sure that they cover the gambit and they're not just like, the master of one domain. Make sure that you have somebody who's covering data and apps and infra and security, modern work. They need to cover all five because AI touches all of those. And where somebody might be very, very good at the data side, they might neglect the application development or application innovation side. And that's going to open you up to a whole new area of security. So if they're just narrowly focused on a certain area, that's something I would caution people on. And then also one thing that I really stress is making sure that they have a strategy outside of just tech. Are they going to partner with you on the education side of it? Are they going to really work with you on, like understanding, how does the LLM work? I've heard a couple of times from Paul and JD, we're worried about, how does the data get into the model itself? Like, are you working with each other to make sure that you're partnering, you're educating each other on it? And then also the one thing that I heard a ton of times, and this is something that I love that we do, is making sure that they understand the ROI and they get to that answer together. That's one of the things in our envisioning sessions we do. We actually sit down, we do some like live action prototyping, which shows, is this even a viable use case? And then we work with the business users to say, hey, look, this is what the end result's going to be. And sometimes I've worked on ROI discussions before where it's like, this is going to save you 100 hours a month. Well, is that truly worth the investment? Or is this going to save me 10, I've done generative AIs that have saved hundreds of thousands of hours a year. Hey, that might be something we want to look into. But helping everybody understand what that ROI looks like, just so we can say, what, that it might be low hanging fruit, but it's not really going to give me any value. Where this is, something that, we're going to save several FTEs, a lot of time, and a lot of effort, and get them back to the job that they truly love and get rid of the mundane. That's the thing I would look at when I'm looking at a partner is are we truly partnering together so that way we can grow together?
All right, excellent. Let's have some fun. Let's do our Ask a Co-panelist. Paul, you're smiling. I'm going to start with you. Do you have a question for one of these brilliant folks you're on the line with? Paul?
Oh, do I have a question?
Yes, Paul, yes.
Okay, let's see here. I do have a question.
All right.
How has your organization incorporated clinicians and business leaders into the evaluation of whether and how AI should be used to advance your organization's mission? And this is much to the point that Jimmy just made, right? So how are you bringing stakeholders, business leaders, clinicians into the fold to determine that ROI or whether an AI solution is the thing you should be looking at?
Who wants to jump in there?
I'll take a shot at that. I think
Great.
that we all really ought to have good governance processes for everything that we do, and that involves having the right clinical stakeholders, right? People, process, technology, the mantra we all like to say all the time. I don't know as AI necessarily changes that a whole lot. So at Dayton Children's, we're looking at our governance. We're taking a relook at our governance processes. I think we have actually pretty good set of governance committees with the right clinical representation for the right subject matter area for what we're going to do or not do, the next project we're going to do or not do that might in the future be generative AI, or there might be more ROI with something that's not generative AI. So we're going to prioritize that ahead. What we're relooking at now is our some of our consumer facing digital health tools, and maybe we need to do a better job of how we're bringing those in the front door and how we're looking at those and getting a consumer lens on things. So I would say that's more of maybe a gap for us than making sure we have the right clinicians involved. But I certainly talked to a lot of other health systems. It would appear that they don't always have mature governance processes. And so people are running off buying crazy things that don't fit in with the architecture, or not getting the right clinical leadership opinions what to do or not do.
Jimmy?
One thing that we add in, Paul, and I've heard a lot of buzzwords, so I'm going to add the buzzword bingo. We help people do centers of excellence where it's interesting right now. When I was a data guy, I could very rarely get the business units to come in and start talking about star schemas or data marts or anything like that. They avoided me like the plague. Now that I'm talking about AI, the business units want to be a part of this discussion. It's amazing. When we offer like our live action prototyping, it's usually standing room only. People want to get in, they want to see us demystify what that looks like. And so I find like inviting people to the table and just being able to prototype and show what this looks like, that's been a huge way to develop that center of excellence, because you'll find the people who really understand how does generative AI fit into this model. And then what we do is at the end of that, we're saying, you know what, these are the people who would probably sit on your centers of excellence. And then that's how, like we probably have them in like, data app and everything like that. But it's a really good way, to get people to the table and put the right people who are now thinking about AI as a, more use case by use case than kind of, just one all encompassing tool. That's been something that we found has been really, really helpful to build that culture.
Ed, anything you want to offer there?
No, Jimmy covered what we see. I think when we get in that room, we might call it envisioning and planning, and others like us call those things the same. When we can collaborate with a client around the whiteboard, around the drawing board, to do those facilitations of with stakeholders, with the business owners, that gets a lot more traction to what really matters, because we as IT and security practitioners, one thing we want to do is enable business. We want to enable those new forms of doing business, so we want to facilitate those. But when you get the business stakeholder into the room and part of that whiteboard diagram, that's when a lot of things open up. We've been doing that for a long time ourselves, and I love seeing the outcomes from that, because it shows what's really on our clients' mind and where some of their challenges are relative to kind of how to approach some of these things. And it's not new to Gen AI, it's just kind of solutioning, if you will.
Very good. JD, I'm sorry, someone want to jump in?
I had a question, but JD can do his. So
Yeah, let's. All right, go ahead, Jimmy.
So for Paul and JD, every single board of directors that I go to says you have to do something with generative AI. So I mean, that just is. It seems to be the de facto right now. How are you handling those conversations with the board? Rather than just trying to pigeonhole something in to say that we're using AI, how are you handling that conversations both with like the board and then, but like your internal stakeholders? Where somebody's like, hey, I want to do this really cool thing with AI.
It starts with being transparent. Yeah, okay, you've heard a buzzword, you think this is really important, you think we've got to do this thing. Why do you think we need to do that? Why is it important for us to stop everything we're doing and go do AI? And usually when we start having that conversation, we get to the underlying reason. Well, we have this problem in maybe some customer relationship or maybe some workflow that we need a solution there. Okay, well, that's great. We can look at that as a problem set that needs a solution, and AI could be an answer to that. It may not be the only answer, but we can get down to, all right, let's actually describe the problem, and then we'll get to a solution for that problem, rather than having a solution and looking for a problem to solve. Because if we do that, we're going to spend a lot of money, and we are most certainly going to miss the mark. So it's really just having that level conversation to just ensure that we're focused on the problem sets that we need to solve for, and not ignoring those, because those all of us have problem sets in our space. Those will just continue to fester and get worse. So that's really the approach I think has been most effective for us so far.
JD, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm not getting those questions from our board. My answer to that question would be, I look at this in terms of course, we don't want to be behind the power curve, right? So for example, with ambient, I would predict that a year from now, if health systems are not doing ambient, they're going to start hearing from their providers, how come my colleagues at the competition have these tools that make their life easier and help them with the documentation and help them get more RVUs and have happier patients? How come the other health systems doing that and we're not doing that? So we like to use the term standard of care a lot in healthcare. Obviously, I would say some of these tools are going to quickly become standard of care for our caregivers. So I think that's sort of the forcing function there.
Absolutely, great point. JD, you have a question for one or both your co-panelists.
I want to riff off something that Ed said earlier with some of the privacy stuff. It's something we probably need to be talking a little bit more about, and that is the unfeasibility of every state coming up with their own privacy law. So, or the GDPR. So we have a random patient from Luxembourg that shows up in Dayton, Ohio, and their kid gets sick. Am I worried about GDPR compliance? No.
Dude, you're not?
Of course not. Do they want us to treat their kid that was in a motor vehicle accident, or do they not?
No, I think the genesis there is GDPR was not created around providers caring for patients. It was, written around, collectors of that data selling it to someone else to make money off of person's privacy.
But we're already covered for that with HIPAA. We're covered in the.
You are indeed, and so if there's a Luxembourg resident and you have expressed, to provide care for your patient, your son or you, we have to have this data, your address, your PII, and that is, you're not breaking any rules with the law. You're disclosing that we're using that information, and their law is GDPR. Our law is HIPAA. Their law is GDPR. So when that Luxembourg patient says, "Hey, you have my data. I don't want it to be in your system." GDPR as a law affects the U.S. as well. Everyone in the U.S.
How does it affect the U.S.?
Because you're holding the sensitive data of an individual from that country in your system. We can take this offline, but there's a good debate, and it's been around for a while. And that person has a right to be forgotten, and they say, "Hey, you need to remove me from your system." That creates an event to say, we need to look into our system. Do we have a legitimate business reason to keep that data? To say no to the request, and that is a business option. But if the business situation isn't such that you have a legit business reason to keep it, then you need to find a way to redact it and communicate to the individual that you're redacting it. It's more emblematic in the relationship of, I buy a service, a subscription to Facebook, for example, or say a widget, and that person starts selling my information to other widget manufacturers, and it's more of a privacy thing around the use of that type of data, not so much PHI, JD. I think everyone would argue that to provide care to a patient, there's a legit business reason to care for it. But GDPR as a law didn't understand everyone else's side of the story. They just imposed it. Now here in the US, I wish I've been a 30-year privacy advocate my whole career. And so, and that's within reason. So I get it. I wish the US, would adopt a single standard, because right now as a service provider, I have to deal with clients that have CCPA, the Consumer Privacy Act in California, which is kind of GDPR light. Yep. You have to opt people out when they want to be out. Then I have Ohio, then I have Massachusetts, then I have the city of Chicago data privacy ordinance for residents, and everything in between. It gets in the thousands. So the only way I can manage that as a business is kind of pick the most stringent, go there, and then everyone else just gets blanket covered, which is it's challenging, it's costly. But that's because our US and use cases for that really haven't matured to what was, let's call it aspirational on the regards of the European Union. But not to get into an argument, but that carries over to US businesses, whether we see that kind of data set or not. The law is that.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that the U.S. Congress needs to figure out what it looks like and do that probably, because it's the only thing that's going to be feasible to go. So there you go, Anthony. That's your next webinar.
Yeah, very good.
I think it's a great one.
We are actually almost out of time. What I want to do is give everyone a chance for sort of a lightning round of final thoughts, best piece of advice for people that are, dipping their toe in here, dealing with this challenge, want to move some things forward, but they maybe have some concerns around security. Let's do a lightning round of best piece of advice. JD, let's start with you.
I guess my advice is don't overreact to things with generative AI, because all the same rules apply: people, process, technology, good governance, good cybersecurity. Don't give up on those core essentials that you ought to be doing for any projects coming in, looking at the ROI. And what should be happening is what normally happens, you got 10 projects on your to-do list, and you've got the resources to do 5 of them, and you need to prioritize those 5. And number 2 and number 4 might be generative AI, or not. It just depends. It just depends what the ROI looks like. So don't change all your processes just because there's some cool new generative AI tools come in. That's my advice.
Perfect. And Paul, you mentioned don't have a solution and run around looking for a problem. That sounds like pretty good advice. What's your final? Go ahead.
Pretty much, yes. So really, it's allow time to consider alternative solutions that could raise risk. Too often, I get the "we need to know right now" line, which to me feels like your typical phishing email. Take the time to be as objective as possible before committing to a course of action that would be difficult to if not impossible to unwind. Certainly, we want to be innovative and creative in solutioning, but take the time to evaluate and ensure that it's the right fit.
Very good, Jimmy. Final thought.
Yep. I encourage everybody to think of AI by the use cases as opposed to like this all-encompassing thing. So pick your use cases, find the relevant data, and sandbox it. Like play with that, build some comfort with what it does and what it doesn't do. We keep hearing there's these new models, they're bigger, better, stronger, faster. We're still not using all the power that the models 18 months ago were using. So really start building out that comfort level and build yourself a good experimenting environment. And then think about AI as an extension of your modern data estate, because candidly, really where we're at with generative AI right now is how do I take the LLM and I put in what we call the RAG architecture, or retrieval augmented generation, and go and grab my data. Give them the ability to promote it just like you would dev, test, and prod in your data estate. There's differences between the two, but they're also very, very similar. So think about it from a use case perspective. Perfect.
Ed, final thought.
I couldn't hearing my colleagues made my job the easiest on this last. I couldn't agree with them more. In particular, JD, with if you've got good practice, you've got good cybersecurity standard, or you've got good execution in that, and you have a good governance program, Gen AI is going to be, not scary. It's gonna kind of fit into that fold. I would suggest understanding the tech debt that is around those oversharing, the identity management side, because where a process of yesterday without Gen AI would look at things in a sense of, obscurity is part of the equation. Not that that's a good security practice at all. In fact, it's not compliant with most regulations, but it's been allowed to be gotten away with. And the ability for a bot to scan and scour all of our data and find those things and add it to a model, that changes things a little bit, but the good governance and the good cybersecurity programs will cover that. So it gives us the ability to not be an office of no. The biggest thing that I go to bed with is I don't want to see us as disabling business because we're security advocates. We need to enable business, but securely. And so I think there's a good good practice in that. And Jimmy, Paul, JD all mentioned those very things. So kind of look at that. Those things will paying heed to what they said would allow us to be the office of yes, but securely.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. All right, that's about all we had time for today. Regarding continuing education, you'd use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recordings are ready for viewing. If you want to work with us, you could reach out to Nancy from our team and go to our website to register for upcoming panels. With that, I want to thank JD Whitlock, Paul Carrillo, Jimmy Ledbetter, and Ed Higgins and Quisitive for making the event possible, and you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.